With the release of the Backrooms movie, I've seen my fair share of stupidly dumb criticisms, mostly stemming from TikTok, no surprise, of people hating on the movie for a handful of pretty dumb reasons, some having way more weight than others. Obviously, this is to be expected when a movie as hyped as this releases in theaters. There are going to be people who like it, people who hate it, and people who are just indifferent to it. It's just the way things are with all forms of media, and the Backrooms movie is no different here. I have no problem with people who understood the movie for what it is and simply just didn't enjoy it. It's their opinion, and don't let me or anyone else boss you into changing it. The issue here stems from a large majority of people who I've seen disliking the Backrooms movie are generally just not understanding the plot Kane Pixels has conveyed through this film. It's one thing to fully grasp a movie and it not be your thing. It's another to watch a movie, not understand it, nor try to, and instead of firing up the old noggin to think of what you just watched, you just make videos ranting online about how ass the movie is, since it's not like Roblox or Steam or any other kind of churned out media. I'm gonna go over the hate for this movie and dissect some of the criticisms I saw of the story, creative choices, and characters, and break them apart, as most can be easily dismissed simply with more insight into the movie. Obviously, people have their own little critiques and criticisms, which I have my own as well, most of mine coming down to viewer preference than actual flaws. But nonetheless, I will share my own slight criticisms of the movie, which in no way paint the movie as bad, but are simple preferences and ideas I wish Kane took and paid more mind to during the filming. Obviously, heavy Backrooms movie spoilers. I'm gonna pretty much be talking about a lot of major scenes and plot points in the movie, along with subjects on why I think it's getting so much more backlash than other recent horror movies released. So let's get into the criticisms I've saw. When I see people leaving dumb and ridiculous hate on the movie that can be very easily be broken apart or dismissed, they usually fall into one of two categories that I've dubbed as the LARP, or the media illiterate. I'll go over each of these categories, most of which are the criticisms they have and that can easily be broken by firing up the old noggin. Of course, these are categories of the people that basically watch the movie with their eyes closed, and not more so the people who watch and understood the movie and personally disliked it. Starting off strong, the category which I knew watching this movie would have the most to say and the least to back up their claims. With the media as massive, popular, and churned out as the Backrooms is, I was expecting a lot of the people seeing this movie to be bracing for a monster fest with 20 different levels and a constant first-person camera view, with a plot that's centered solely on escaping the Backrooms, as this is mainly what a large sum of people have gone to believe the sole purpose of the Backrooms is, that the Backrooms is only meant to be escaped, serving only as this horror-filled uncanny nightmare that you must leave immediately or the monsters will get you. I feel like this is the main idea a lot of people had going into this movie, and when the Backrooms was presented more as a separate entity in itself that copies and attempts to recreate everything in it, they simply felt like tricked in a way. The Backrooms is not good or evil, it's this unexplainable, unfeeling force of nature, and that's all it simply is, and that's all it ever will be. I feel this look on the Backrooms Kane was going for threw a lot of people off, especially people who have not seen Kane's previous work. That being said, my views and enjoyment on this movie were not biased towards Kane Pixels at all, as though I had watched a few of his videos, only one being Backrooms based. I went in with an open mind to Kane's adaptation of the Backrooms. That being said, you do not need to see Kane's previous Backrooms videos to enjoy this movie, nor do you need them to understand it. I feel it's a common misconception that people need to watch his videos first before heading into the movie, and as someone who only watched Kane's first Backrooms video and the oldest few, they are definitely not needed to understand the movie or the plot or the characters or anything at all, and you will be fine if you head in completely blind. I'd honestly argue that if you took someone who had no idea what the Backrooms even was and put them in a theater with this movie playing, if they had even an ounce of media literacy, they would be able to fully understand the story and what is happening. Maybe not to the extent of someone who has seen outside media, but enough to understand the movie as a whole, along with the overall point the Backrooms itself plays and represents in the plot of the movie. You take someone who's only heard of the Backrooms through games where you're running from monsters the whole time, and you show them the Backrooms movie where the plot at the beginning moves very slow in order to flesh out the characters and world, and the Backrooms itself appearing much later, focusing more so on the exploration of the facility than any monsters, at least at the beginning, is obviously going to catch some criticism from said person. They went into this movie expecting something completely different, constant adrenaline-filled chase scenes to be pumped through this entire movie, hitting the build-up and tension leading to said scenes. The beginning sequence of the async worker at the beginning of the movie, where he's separated from his team, is what I figured a lot of people thought this movie was going to be. An hour and a half of VHS film of someone running through the backrooms escaping some mold monster. And though I feel a few people would have enjoyed that, I am much, much happier with the movie we got. A movie with real developed characters, an actual real feeling world, and a real developed threat that actually ties into the plot and is explained in the movie. The backrooms we got not being just an evil, uncanny location, but more so an echo of trauma and memory, will always be better to me than the prior. And that's something a lot of people who saw this movie were not ready for. They were not ready for a unique story or unique take on the backrooms. They went in expecting the same old formula, regurgitated and spat at them like the countless shovelware slop and Roblox games throughout the years. People watch this movie and simply do not understand the symbolism, the metaphors, the story, or the part the characters play in said story. This movie, whether you like it or not, makes you think. I found myself thinking and reflecting over what I had just watched days after leaving the theater, and I feel this period of looking back on what you just watched separates one from hating or enjoying the movie. Some of the haters I've seen simply didn't understand the overall role the backroom serves as a whole. They don't understand why Clark turned evil, in heavy quotations. They don't understand why Mark followed Clark into the backrooms. They don't understand the purpose of the still lifes in the story or async. To criticize a movie, one must understand it fully, and to criticize without understanding is simply blind, flailing hate. When I watched the movie, it was vastly different than what I thought it would be. Does that mean the movie is bad? Absolutely not. And the vast expectations of this movie through media and hype is bound to skyrocket, people thinking this movie is bad when in reality it isn't at all. And this is vastly increased when people don't stop and think about what they watched. With all this talk of symbolism and reflecting on what you watch, it probably makes me sound like some stuck-up film bro. I am definitely not. I went into this movie simply as a fan of Kane Pixels. I'd argue not even a huge fan, as I've only seen his first Backrooms video in the oldest view. And yet I am living proof that you do not need to be some Backrooms fanatic to understand or enjoy this movie. You need media literacy to understand and catch the narrative Kane is displaying. If anything, this movie has shown me that media literacy is practically dead among a small majority of the audience. I went with a large group of friends to see this movie, and there were 8 of us, including myself. All of us knew about the Backrooms previously. 4 of the 8, including myself, knew who Kane Pixels was. 2 of the 8, including myself, watched a Kane Pixels video, and only 1 of the 8, being my one other friend, had watched all of the Kane Pixels Backrooms videos and was aware of the lore leading up to this movie. Basically, a large majority of my group were not in any way biased towards Kane Pixels being the producer of this movie, nor were aware of the videos preceding this movie Kane had made. After the movie was over, we obviously all had our own opinions and interpretations towards the movie. 6 of the 8, including myself, thinking the movie was a good adaptation of the Backrooms and having an interest in the story in general. And the other odd one out, the other 2 of the 8, thought it was complete ass. And when asked why, it was chalked up to, I don't understand this, I don't understand that. The Backrooms as a whole is supposed to make no sense. Yet crafting a plot around this unexplainable force is why I think this movie is so good. After explanation and discussion with them, one of the 2 switched their view towards a more positive stand, while the other stayed stagnant to his take, which is completely fine, as understanding and still disliking the movie is completely okay. It's not understanding it and hating without a real reason that's the problem. So hopefully you can understand my frustration when I fire up TikTok and get greeted with people with the same view as my 2 friends, oblivious and frustrated that they didn't understand what was going on in the film and feeling as if it were a waste of time. It sucks seeing people who would hopefully enjoy the movie more if they understood the plot, but instead are blind to it and take a more negative stance. I'm going to go over some of the main criticisms I've seen in this movie, mostly stemming from confusion of most plot points and overall opinions on the elements in the movie. First of all, let's start with one major subject that fans and non-fans I've seen to always been harping on. The monster is a giant key piece in this movie. I've seen varying opinions, but most seeing how Pirate Clark isn't scary and how the oversaturated mold monster would have been a much better fit. I strongly disagree, as I feel Pirate Clark is, in my opinion, extremely uncanny and creepy, but also important to the plot of the movie, reinforcing the overall goal and purpose of the Backrooms. A purpose to copy and remake anything and everything. Pirate Clark being the Backrooms view and manifestation of Clark. more so his internal and sometimes external anger and frustration towards the world and those around him. Even the way Pyro Clark stumbles around I see as extremely unnerving, but I feel this also symbolizes the drunken stumbling haze Clark would be in when returning home to his ex-wife. Along with how tall Pyro Clark is could symbolize Clark's massive ego along with his monstrous stature that intimidated and frightened his ex-wife, driving her to divorce him. A simple mold monster of black blobs and lines will not have the same emotional impact that Clark has. To see a character we have followed through the movie contorted and constructed for what he truly has been emotionally through the movie. While talking about Clark, I've seen another criticism talking about how it makes no sense that he quote-unquote turned evil through the film. This is not the case, as Clark has never been a good person throughout this entire movie. Though I feel Clark is very complex character-wise and cannot be dumbed down to good or evil, he is in no way a good person. We see the aftermath of his divorce with his ex-wife, a divorce catalyst by Clark's drinking, his anger, his whining. Instead of seeking a way to better himself in reflection to his actions, he seeks out Mary in order to regurgitate his twisted view back at him, a view that he did nothing wrong in his relationship, that was actually his wife being to blame. We see Clark's temper with the chair breaking in the furniture store, along with his selfishness and carelessness dragging his coworkers into the backrooms despite being aware of the unknown dangers that may lurk inside. Clark has never been redeemed once through this movie and has always planned to stay how he is. This is completely reinforced at the dinner scene. The dinner scene, as I've seen, apparently made no sense to a lot of people. Clark makes Mary do the roleplay scene earlier in the movie. This time, him at the right and her at the left. Contrast to the beginning, demonstrating a shift in control of the situation. Clark desperately wants closure that he did nothing wrong in his relationship, going to the point of kidnapping Mary to get it. Obviously, Clark has lost his sanity in the backrooms, but for the most part did not change at all, simply acting more on his emotions and impulses that he already had than he did before. Clark, wanting to be an architect and residing in a place that breaks all the rules of architecture, this truly shows how far gone he is, and the point for which his sanity has been. Clark has never been a good person through the movie, as I've said before. The only ounce of humanity shown was attempting to tie Mary loose from the chair he tied her to. And he only does this after he had the closure from Mary, that he doesn't have to change, that he can stay the way he is, free of consequence. Obviously this doesn't last long as he gets nibbled up, but it's still a fitting end for his character, coming full circle in his delusion. As for Clark killing and eating the still lifes and his dead coworkers in the fridge, I see as Clark's need to feed on others' energy and enjoyment in the real world being turned grisly into a physical embodiment of this. Though I do think the corpse of his coworkers were more so for Pyro Clark than himself. Well, on the note of the still lifes, Clark enjoys their company so much because they are stagnant like furniture, something he can control without backlash as he pleases. He says they cannot feel pain and are also edible, and I see people questioning how he figured this out. I take this as Clark turning back to his already buried roots with his ex-wife and had begun to get physically abusive with the still life version of her, leading from beating to a twisted form of cannibalism, perhaps stemming from an extreme hunger or hatred. While on the topic of the still lives and more importantly, Clark's ex-wife, I had to explain to one of my friends that the red-haired still life with like 20 faces was a copied reflection of Clark's ex-wife. So I could see how someone at a theater could potentially miss this extreme plot point despite a framed photo of her being seen earlier in the film. The still life of Clark's ex-wife served to show Clark's abuse from her perspective. She bolts when Pyro Clark enters the room and literally slams herself into a literal corner in a desperate, futile attempt to escape the situation. Her raw fear of Pyro Clark is copied from the Backrooms and highlights her fear of Clark when he's at his worst, as Pyro Clark represents all the worst parts of Clark, his hate, his resentment, especially in his drunken state. This demonstrates physically how she was always cornered when he came home drunk, and is a clear display of Clark's past that showed that he has never once been redeemed through this entire movie. He still drinks, he still whines, he has kept those toxic emotions alongside him through the entire movie. Another point I see people making is the strange relationship between Pyro Clark and normal Clark. A point people make is that it makes no sense how Pyro Clark was seemingly peaceful with Clark for a bit, and how it made no sense how he turned on him later in the film. Obviously, with Pyro Clark and Clark, we got to talk of their relationship as they are seen walking together, apparently in some kind of odd friendship seen in the photograph later in the film. Obviously, this is short-lived, Howard Clark doesn't attack Clark at first, as it functions as his own psyche and trauma. He still feels he is in the right and is not the problem, and therefore doesn't kill Clark. He doesn't see Clark as a threat. Howard Clark simply allows him to pass, as his anger is not directed at himself. Only after Mary makes it clear at the dinner scene that Clark is the problem, yet he doesn't have to change, she feeds into the narcissism of Clark's own destructive mind, one that Howard Clark mirrors, one that makes Howard Clark realize he is the problem and from its perspective is also a threat, from which begins to eat Clark in a twisted fate as Clark's narcissism comes full circle, his internal problems literally consuming him. I feel that covers a lot of the larger points I've seen, but I'll go over a quick round other criticisms I saw. Plot moves too slow. Plot I feel moves just fast enough to begin building unsettlingness and unease. If the plot moved too fast, there would be a lot left to be desired. In the slow burn, I feel amped up the later chase scene to a grand extent. The characters have too much screen time and are focused on too much. Are we serious? You need characters to have a story in the first place, and without the development of Clark and Mary as characters, the story wouldn't hold as much weight, nor would it be understandable. Honestly, that covers a lot of the pretty bad criticisms I've seen, but I'm going to get more into my little criticisms of the movie, which one starts with the ending. I've seen people saying that the ending was too rushed or abrupt, and this I somewhat kind of agree with. Obviously, with more screen time and resources to work with, this is out of control, but I wish they would have wrapped up Mary's story with async a little bit more. Though I do feel the ending was good enough, I just wish it played more into the fate of Mary, as now it is left up to interpretation what async has done with her. On the topic of async, I really do wish they used Mark Duplass's character more through the movie. As someone who watched both Creep movies where his character stars in them, I was extremely hyped to see him casted and was somewhat let down, not only by his little amount of screen time, but how much they seemingly wasted him as an actor. Of course, these criticisms are heavily biased and is more so my opinion. I just wish they did more with him. And finally, I just wish they explored the scale of the Backrooms just a bit more than they did. I wish they just had more complex and larger scaled rooms, much like the pit Mary finds, and a real stretch into how infinite it really is. Of course, all these issues rely on screen time and resources. There's a second Backrooms movie coming out apparently, which should cover my small nitpicks. I just wish they stretched their runtime a bit more just to cover the narrative and wrap it up more cleanly at the end. With that being said, this pretty much wraps up the video, the good and the bad. The Backrooms movie was great and I had so much fun watching it. It really brought me back to the same feeling I had when other adaptations of games released. The Backrooms obviously being a much better adaptation. Let me know if you have any criticisms of the movie, how you feel about it, positive or negative. I'm open to all ideas and opinions. Also, how you guys may have interpreted some of the scenes. Obviously, some of the explanations I did are not set in stone, so I'd like to hear if anyone else has any. Thank you guys for watching, and
like, subscribe, and hit the bell.